A difficult situation on the Lyman front and a trap for the occupiers near Dobropilya. The IAEA demands the return of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to Ukrainian control and schools without shelters. Why did repairs only start now? The main news of Friday, September 19th in the TCH summary broadcast. The channel 1+1 is working as part of the national marathon. Greetings to you, unbreakable Ukrainians. The Muscovites continue to shell our peaceful cities. 2 people were injured after a nighttime Shahed drone attack on Pavlohrad in the Dnipropetrovsk region. More than a dozen explosions were heard in the city. Fires broke out, but rescuers have already contained them. In total, 6 people were injured in the region during the day. In Nikopol, the Russians attacked with artillery and FPV drones, injuring 5 civilians. In the Sinelnikovo district, after Kaabi strikes, a 61-year-old man was hospitalized. In Bilozerka, Kherson region, at noon, the Russians dropped explosives from a drone onto a woman while she was in her own yard. She was hospitalized with blast injuries. A few hours earlier, a man was killed near Odradokamyanka. He was killed by an enemy mine while grazing cattle. 2 more people were wounded in Antonivka. And in Kherson itself, firefighters, under the threat of repeated attacks, were extinguishing a large fire that broke out due to shelling. In the morning, in the Stepnohursk community in Zaporizhzhia, the occupiers attacked a pensioner with an FPV drone. He is in the hospital in serious condition. In total, 14 settlements in the region came under enemy fire. In Bylikolodia's Kharkiv region, a man was wounded. In the Bliznyukivska community, the House of Culture and warehouses were damaged. There is also destruction in the Chuhuiv and Kupiansk districts. The occupiers are trying to break out of the trap they found themselves in near Dobropilya in Donetsk region. Ukrainian forces continue to encircle the Russians near the village of Kucherev Yar, tightening the ring between the villages of Pankivka, which was recently cleared of occupiers, and Ivanivka, located north of Pokrovsk. The Russians are leveling Pokrovsk itself with artillery and guided bombs, just as they are doing with Kostiantynivka. The situation there is becoming more complicated. Civilians who still remain in the city cannot leave because of the shelling and the lack of communication. This was reported by Irina Rybakova, the press officer of the 93rd Brigade Kolodny Yar. She personally found such residents and ended up under Russian shelling together with them right in their home. Irina Rybakova wrote about this on her Facebook page. The occupiers are launching an offensive in the area of Yarova and Drobyshev. According to Deep State, there are also reports of our positions being lost there. Our soldiers are also having a hard time in the area of neighboring Yampil. All these villages are in the Lyman direction. The number of enemy assaults there has been increasing in recent days. They are doing everything they can to break through to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. Today, the city of Orikhiv in Zaporizhzhia was supposed to celebrate its 250th anniversary. But City Day now is just another day of survival and by no means a celebration. And although the city is covered with nets, the number of drones attacking civilians has increased several times over. The enemy is using almost their entire range of drones, from reconnaissance Orlans to strike Lancets, FPVs and Molnias. People who still remain in the city are afraid to go outside because they become targets for Russian drone pilots. Our team managed to enter the city and see what is happening there now. A report from Orikhiv by TSN correspondent Ruslan Yarmolyuk.
On the bank of the Konka River lie kayaks and canoes that were hastily abandoned. When the war began, this canoe was left here on the pier, and it has remained ever since, waiting for better times when children will return and be able to paddle down the river again. Life here stopped in an instant. Abandoned children's sportswear, certificates, posters and victory pennants hang on the walls. Svetlana, whom we met in the city, once even brought her son to this sports school.
There were children. My nephew went, my niece went, my son went for a little while, not long. Well, the children practiced here.
Boats that were just about to be launched for training have been stuck on land for years now. A roof with holes, walls riddled with shrapnel, kayaks full of holes, and the echo of explosions in the city. Bombed but unbroken Orikhiv. It's hard to believe, but right here there used to be a children's and youth sports school for rowing and paddling. And not just any school, but one that trained specialists for the Olympic Reserve. Boys and girls trained here, and this was the future of our sport in Ukraine. The war came to Orikhiv very quickly, so there was no time to evacuate the school. And so these priceless specimens of kayaks and canoes still remain here in the city under shelling as silent witnesses to the former glory of our Ukrainian rowing and paddling sports. Children's laughter has not been heard on the pier for a long time. The young Olympic Reserve athletes who once trained here have scattered around the world with their parents, leaving their dreams of big-time sports here on this bank of the Konka by the ruined sports school.
Every half hour, attack drones fly over here. Their goal, as far as we understand, is not so much to disrupt military logistics as it is simply to terrorize and intimidate the civilian population so that people leave Orikhiv and stop helping the armed forces. Well, just a few days ago, a drone landed on the roof of a minibus. Fortunately, it didn't explode. No one was injured. A little earlier, a drone was chasing a minibus right in a spot where there are no anti-drone nets. It caught up. The vehicle was damaged and the driver is in intensive care. So we see that today the Russians are increasingly using terror tactics against the civilian population.
Orikhiv is in ruins. All the apartment buildings have been destroyed by aerial bombs and shells, and private houses have been burned down by kamikaze drones. Danger lurks from the sky for local residents every minute.
We listen very carefully, Katya. We listen to the sky. As soon as we hear something buzzing, we immediately hide under a tree or wherever we can. Otherwise, we plant our gardens. We survive. They give us humanitarian aid.
Svetlana, while it's raining outside, which keeps the drones away, went out to get some milk. She lives with her elderly parents. It's because of them that she stays on the front line in her own city.
My parents are old. First of all, they don't want to leave. We feed a lot of dogs, we feed cats too. And besides, we have no means to leave.
There are still elderly people remaining in Orikhiv. All the civilian infrastructure in the city has been destroyed. The air is constantly filled with the sound of enemy drones.
We hide in the basements.
This is Hena, he's 49. He lives in the city with his brother. He rarely goes outside. He pulls a cart, looking for something to heat the stove with. Firewood?
Yes, firewood.
Hena's silhouette with the cart is swallowed by the mist and rain. Only this dog remains on the street, having heard human voices and come out of hiding. He keeps looking at the silhouettes as if searching for his owner who left him alone in this place. Roxlana Yarmolyuk, Mikhailo Podyata, TSN 1+1, Marathon, United News.
And now we return to the situation in Donetsk region. President Zelensky reported that Ukrainian forces have achieved significant results in the areas of Pokrovsk and Dobropilya, inflicting substantial losses on the enemy. Zelensky spoke about this in his address on the 1,303rd day, following a meeting with the soldiers defending Donetsk region. According to the president, the defense forces are now conducting a large-scale counteroffensive operation. It is proceeding according to a previously developed plan. 7 settlements have already been liberated, and another 9 have been cleared of Russian presence. The president emphasized that occupiers attempting to enter the liberated territories are being destroyed.
We are currently carrying out one of our counteroffensive operations. The guys are doing great. In the Donetsk direction, near Pokrovsk and Dobropilya, there are fierce battles, but we have managed to inflict significant losses on the Russians. Since the start of the operation, our soldiers have already liberated 160 square kilometers. More than 170 square kilometers have also been cleared of the occupier. We have significantly replenished our exchange fund.
There are no signs that Putin is interested in peace negotiations with Ukraine. This statement was made by the head of British intelligence, Richard Moore. According to MI6 estimates, the Kremlin leader has not changed his plans regarding Ukrainian territories in any way, even though he is openly bogged down in the war and has not achieved significant gains because he underestimated the Ukrainians. At the same time, the Russian leader spares neither Ukrainians nor his own citizens, sending them into meat grinder assaults. In addition, Richard Moore called on Russians who have the courage to speak the truth to cooperate with British intelligence. He promised absolute protection to such agents. He also announced that they have created a platform on the darknet for recruitment, where sensitive information about illegal activities anywhere in the world can be passed to the intelligence service, or individuals can offer their own services.
I see absolutely no evidence that Russian President Vladimir Putin has any interest in a peaceful settlement except for the capitulation of Ukraine. He is simply stringing us along. Putin denies Ukraine's sovereignty and even its existence as a country and a nation. He seeks to impose his imperial will by any means available to him, but he will not succeed. Russia simply does not have enough resources to completely subjugate Ukraine by force. Yes, they are advancing on the battlefield, but at a snail's pace and with horrific losses. And Putin's army is still far from achieving the initial objectives of the invasion. Frankly speaking, Putin has bitten off more than he can chew.
Immediate deoccupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. A resolution with this demand was adopted today by the IAEA General Conference. 62 countries supported the document. According to it, the occupiers must immediately leave the territory of the nuclear facility and return the power plant to the full control of Ukraine. The plant has been under occupation since March 2022. At the same time, the Russians have set up artillery positions and an ammunition depot on the industrial site. From there, they fire a D-30 howitzer, which creates an additional risk for the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. New restrictions for Russian energy and finance from the European Commission. Some of them may be introduced for the first time. Today in Brussels, the 19th package of sanctions was presented. The public announcement of what might be included was delayed due to consultations with the United States. Does the 19th package contain measures advocated by Donald Trump, specifically the refusal to purchase Russian oil? Radio Svoboda's correspondent in Brussels, Zoriana Stepanenko, has the details, reporting exclusively for TSN.
An EU refusal to buy Russian oil right now would, without exaggeration, be a sensation, but it is not included in the 19th package. However, it does include a ban on Russian liquefied natural gas, which is purchased by a number of EU countries. There was already a plan to completely replace it with fuel from other suppliers or sources, but the deadline was different, by the end of 2027. Now, there is an idea to accomplish this before that deadline, thus pushing Russian LNG out of here a year earlier. I should note that the previous plan had already been criticized by the EU countries most dependent on Russian fossil fuels, Hungary and Slovakia. Now that the timeline has been shortened, and moreover as part of a sanctions package that requires the approval of all EU countries, it can be assumed that they will resist. It is also proposed to add 45 Russian and foreign companies that support the Russian military-industrial complex to the blacklist, as well as another 118 ships from Russia's so-called shadow fleet. These are vessels that transport fuel in circumvention of existing restrictions. Among the proposals is also a ban on transactions with the largest energy companies, Rosneft and Gazprom Neft, and for the first time, as part of the fight against sanctions evasion, a ban on cryptocurrency transactions. The head of the European Commission insists that EU sanctions are effective and that Russia's overheated war economy, quote, is operating at its limit.
When we talk to partners who maintain contact with Russia, we hear that one of Russia's first requests is the easing of sanctions. We know that our sanctions are an effective tool of economic pressure, and we will continue to apply them until Russia sits down at the negotiating table with Ukraine to achieve a just and lasting peace.
Unlike previous packages, the 19th has several objectives at once. In addition to restricting Russia's revenues, which it uses to finance the war against Ukraine, it is also meant to demonstrate to American partners that the EU is doing its part. Donald Trump expects Europe to completely abandon Russian oil. Otherwise, he believes the game is not fair. Quote, the US president noted, if the price of raw materials drops, Russia will move toward a settlement in Ukraine. However, experts interviewed by Radio Liberty are not convinced that this yet-to-be-adopted decision will have such far-reaching consequences.
Halting the supply of Russian oil to the EU would be a good step in the right direction. But this is not enough to completely stop Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and its funding. We need additional measures. Sanctions against natural gas have been relatively successful, and we need to strengthen them. For example, we know that Russian LNG worth billions of euros is still flowing into the EU.
The more time the European Union takes to give up fossil fuels from Russia, the more time Moscow has to find other buyers, analysts note. They do not expect that the blow to the Russian budget from the 19th package of sanctions will be devastating. The intrigue remains as to whether Hungary and Slovakia, which have increased their imports of Russian energy resources even during the full-scale war against Ukraine, will approve this round of restrictions. The Financial Times has learned that in order to make Viktor Orban more amenable to sanctions, the European Commission may unfreeze about 550 million euros from the EU fund for Hungary. Traditionally, proposals from the European Commission require a unanimous yes from all EU member states. The discussions began today. From Brussels, Zoriana Stepanenko, Marek Hajduk, Radio Liberty, especially for TSN, 1+1, Marathon, United News.
They discussed the war in Ukraine and mutual visits. Donald Trump held a conversation with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. As the US president reported on his social network, Truth Social, they made progress on many very important issues. In particular, the topics included trade, issues with fentanyl, the need to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, as well as the approval of the agreement regarding the social network TikTok. Donald Trump added that he will meet with his Chinese counterpart at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in South Korea, and at the beginning of the new year he will visit China, while Xi Jinping will later come to America. Trump called the conversation with the Chinese leader productive. Disappointment in Putin, pressure on Russia, and assistance to Ukraine were also topics of discussion during the US president's visit to Britain. Donald Trump was given an exceptionally lavish reception against the backdrop of mass protests against the arrival of the American leader. What made the visit memorable and why the monarch mentioned Ukraine during it, TSN correspondent Katerina Fedorchenko will tell us.
a visit covered by all the world's media, for which British police are monitoring land, air and water. Guards are diligently rehearsing ahead of their participation in the parade. The golden royal carriages are also at the ready. A visit that brought thousands of Britons out to protest and whose reaction has caused a rift in British society. Bold actions with hints of pedophilia and the arrests of those involved. All of this is part of President Trump's second state visit to the United Kingdom. During his first term, he was received by the now late Queen Elizabeth II. That visit was remembered for a series of awkward incidents, mostly on Trump's part. The American president broke protocol, for example, by walking ahead of the monarch, which drew a storm of criticism in the press. Now, neither the British media nor the public have any particular fondness for the US president. According to a poll, only 16% of Britons support him as a politician, and protocol services are already wary of tough questions from the press that may arise during public events. Under these circumstances, the royal family has to balance between the secret mission of charming Trump and explaining such a lavish reception to their subjects. A helicopter carrying the American president and the First Lady lands in Windsor. The Trumps are greeted by Crown Prince William and his wife. Soon after, the King and Queen join them. The security measures are unprecedented, especially in light of the murder of the president's ally in America.
This will involve reviewing routes, premises, residences where they are staying, inspecting any buildings overlooking these areas, lines of sight and so on, any possible threat.
More than 1,000 guards and cavalry with 100 horses. Carriages are involved for the American president with the British monarch and for the Queen with the US First Lady. Streets are draped with flags and there is a joint air show. The British press openly calls this visit pompous. A fly in the ointment of the royal reception are the street protests. In total, about 5,000 people turn out just for this protest. And at Windsor Castle, the place where Trump is being received, before his arrival, protesters managed to project a photograph of Trump with the late billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, who was convicted of sex crimes and died in prison. The American president vehemently denies any connection with him. As a result, for this audacious protest, British police arrest 4 people. Meanwhile, a lavish banquet is being prepared in Windsor. 160 guests have been invited, and while they are gathering, the staff uses rulers to precisely arrange the expensive tableware, 5 glasses and goblets, and about a dozen pieces of cutlery for each guest. Amidst the luxurious dresses and jewelry, it's impossible not to notice the matching outfits of British Queen Camilla and Melania Trump. The bright blue and yellow dresses are very reminiscent of the Ukrainian flag. So the press is wondering whether this might be a gesture of support for our country. After all, commentators call King Charles Britain's secret diplomatic weapon. Apparently, diplomats asked the monarch, who is said to be supportive of Ukraine, for a favor to nudge Trump toward decisive action against Russia and Putin. During a 7-minute toast, the text of which was carefully prepared by British broadcasters, Charles III openly speaks about supporting our country and makes Trump nod in response.
In 2 world wars, we fought together to defeat the forces of tyranny. Today, as tyranny once again threatens Europe, we and our allies stand together in supporting Ukraine to deter aggression and secure peace.
At this banquet, Trump mostly talks about cooperation between countries. And it is coming alive again. After all, among the guests are representatives of America's tech industry and business, ready to launch multi-billion-dollar projects with the British. To charm Trump, the British royal family lavishes him with flattery. After the exquisite dinner, the guests are served a special treat, rare drinks. Port wine from 1945 in honor of Trump as the 45th President of the United States, and cognac from 1913, the very year when Donald Trump's future mother was born, on the Scottish Isle of Lewis. Another compliment for the guests. A cocktail is made especially for them, featuring American whiskey. The morning after the banquet is already a working day for the American president. At the farewell with the king, Trump pats Charles on the shoulder, breaking all protocol rules. And most likely the overly familiar behavior of the American president will remain among the few scandalous moments of the visit, since the rest, including interactions with the press, go surprisingly smoothly.
A wonderful gentleman and a wonderful king.
With the British Prime Minister, the American president discusses tariffs, signs agreements, and talks about ending the war in Ukraine. Already in front of the press, Keir Starmer publicly declares the need to decisively increase pressure on Putin so that he agrees to peace. The US president admits, ending the war has turned out to be more difficult than he expected.
One thing that I thought would be the easiest in the world because of my relationship with President Putin, but he let me down. He really let me down.
Trump states that he hopes to have good news on this topic soon, without specifying what he meant. And he insists, the main way to force Russia to make peace is to stop buying its oil. This accusation is directed particularly at Europe and to lower oil prices. Then Putin will have to agree to negotiations. The British press notes that Prime Minister Starmer apparently failed to persuade Trump to impose sanctions against Russia himself. Donald Trump is leaving Britain completely satisfied. He became the first US president to visit the country twice on a state visit. Katerina Fedorchenko, Oksana Tkachenko, TSN 1+1, Marathon, United News.
But was Donald Trump himself satisfied? How is the visit to London and the royal honors being commented on in the United States? We'll ask our own correspondent in the United States, Olha Koshelenko, about this. She is in direct contact with us. Olya, congratulations. So what mood did Trump return home in?
Oh, hello. Donald Trump enjoyed his visit to the United Kingdom immensely. The day before, returning on Air Force One, he told journalists that he was received at the highest level with great respect for him and for America. And that personally, for example, he saw more paintings and sculptures than he had seen in his entire life before. And the fact that he enjoys this royal protocol with honors, carriage rides, and so on, the President of the United States had not hidden before. He said that the British are probably the best at this. And besides that, one of his earliest childhood memories is connected to the British royal family, which he describes in his memoirs, The Art of the Deal. His mother, who was Scottish by origin, was watching the coronation of Elizabeth II on television in June 1953. And his father told her, "Turn it off, because all these royals are just a bunch of fake actors." But young Donald was captivated by this royal splendor even back then, and since then, he has never changed his mind. Later, he communicated with Charles when he was still a prince. And after his divorce from Princess Diana, as her biographer Selena Scott writes, Trump showered the princess with numerous signs of attention and, for example, sent her flowers, considering, according to Scott, Diana as his potential trophy wife. Such are the family stories. And moreover, in the United States, they really emphasize that this is the second state visit to the monarch. And for Trump, they made an exception because they never actually do two state visits, even if the president is serving a second term. But there was, in fact, one rather unpleasant moment. A British journalist asked Trump at a joint press conference with Keir Starmer, saying, "Your Vice President Vance previously stated that there are problems with freedom of speech in Britain, but you fired the popular TV host Jimmy Kimmel." Let me explain here. Jimmy Kimmel is truly a super popular TV host who, for over 20 years here in the United States, has hosted his own comedy show, or rather used to host it, because he was fired for making a joke about Donald Trump. In fact, even the president himself doesn't hide the fact that Kimmel only spoke badly about him, and of course he didn't like that. So, about which particular joke got Kimmel fired and why the Pentagon is now monitoring employees' social media here, I suggest we take a look at the report we've prepared. The Jimmy Kimmel Theater is closed. The show, which used to draw audiences both live in the studio and in front of their TV screens, has been shut down. And in one of the last episodes, Kimmel made ironic remarks about how Republicans are trying to pretend that the suspect in the murder of popular blogger Charlie Kirk is not one of their supporters, even though he grew up in a family with MAGA views. He especially mocked the way the President of the United States himself is mourning Kirk's death, calling him his friend. In Los Angeles and New York, Kimmel's supporters gathered for rallies. He became the second comedian to lose his job for mocking Trump. A little earlier, the show of another popular TV host, Stephen Colbert, was cancelled. Both were fierce critics of the current president.
What happened isn't just about one guy losing his show. The government is testing how far it can go with censorship. And you know what? When they see that it works, when they see that the networks give in, they won't stop. That will never happen. First Colbert, then Kimmel. What's next? Are we going to cancel Sesame Street because Big Bird believes in climate change?
Attorney General Pam Bondi stated, "This isn't about censorship, it's about fighting hate speech." Vice President J.D. Vance joked in a post on X that Kimmel's show will now be hosted by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a reference to the fact that Rubio previously received the additional role of National Security Advisor after Michael Wolff's was dismissed. Donald Trump himself did not hide his satisfaction over the firing of the TV hosts he had long disliked. He even commented on it in the presence of UK Prime Minister Starmer at their joint press conference.
Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings. And he also said terrible things about the great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk, and Jimmy Kimmel himself is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings. He should have been fired a long time ago. So, you can call it freedom of speech or not. He was fired because he lacked talent.
Earlier, Defense Minister Pete Hegseth publicly stated that his department would monitor social media and private statements made by employees. According to American media, several employees were suspended from work there for criticizing the now deceased blogger Charlie Kirk. From the United States, Olha Koshelenko, Maxim Shinkarenko, TSN 1+1 Marathon United News.